One night, quite a while ago, I was invited to dinner at a friend's house who happened to be a nephew of Craig McCracken, the creator of Powerpuff Girls. The party was pleasant, and I was surprised when Mr. McCracken himself was one of the guests. As a teenage girl, I was absolutely obsessed with the show. I would hog the TV for the premiere of every episode and yell at my younger brothers if they tried so much as a word before the commercial break. Being somewhat moody, spunky teen, Buttercup was always my favorite of the three girls. I loved her sarcasm and her edginess. Upon meeting Mr. McCracken, I had told him that how much of a big fan I was, and I was ecstatic to meet him. But he seemed very uninterested, and I was speaking in a vague and then rushed tone, no matter what we were speaking of. I suppose it was because of the show's fans could be quite annoying, so I backed off. Somewhere a bit later, Mr. McCracken left hurriedly, not noticing that he left a small envelope with a single disc inside. I looked around quickly before taking the disc, realizing and thinking probably it was being maybe another cartoon invented by the genius behind the Powerpuff Girls. After the party was over, I rushed home to see what this mysterious disc had in store for me. And with my hands trembling, I lifted the shiny disc from the envelope, and my heart fluttered with delight when I saw that the DVD had Buttercup.AVI on it, in purple Sharpie. Buttercup, as I said before, had always been my favorite, and I was incredibly anxious to watch this episode, and for that reason or another, had not been released. But then left next to a chair at the dinner party, I put the disc into my DVD player, and started it instantly. No title screen, no credits, nothing. The episode started awfully. The colors had been dulled down to what seemed to be a sepia tone, and the house looked all wrong. The windows were busted out, and the walls looked dirty. There were small reddish-brown footprints going up in the middle of the stair window. Confused and creeped out, I continued watching. The camera zoomed into the house, which looked even worse than outside. Professor Utonium was sitting on the floor, sobbing. He looked up at the camera, and his eyes were so realistic for even advanced animation at this time, and this was horrid, pained expression on his usually smiling face. "Buttercup, what have you done? What have you done to your sisters? Why? He sounded genuinely like someone who had lost everything, and my heart hurt for him. Behind the sagged corpses of Blossom and Bubbles, horribly mangled, Blossom was missing one eye. Hyperrealistic blood dripped out of her body. Her limbs were broken and twisted, hid in angles. Her heart had been pounded dead, and beside her, a blood-stained pink dress where she had been, down. Bubbles was killed in a similar fashion, except that both her eyes were missing, and her legs were torn off. Disturbed more than ever had been in my entire life. Maybe I began to feel sick to my stomach, but I knew I had to keep watching. The camera then cuts to Buttercup, whose eyes were very realistic. Unlike Professor Utonium's, she had an unusual, heartless, bitter look on those two realistic green eyes, and a twisted smile on her face. She was stained with blood from head to toe. She lifted her head up very slowly, and a maniacal laughter left her mouth, ringing throughout the room and my mind. "Didn't you see that coming, Professor? I'm sure your adoring fans did," she spat, sounding disgusting with the words adoring fans. They were so annoying that their constant happiness for their love have always been in the spotlight. Always being so nice, good, and perfect, I hated it for years. It disgusted me. But not anymore, Professor. Not anymore. Professor Utonium continued sobbing, and the horrid sounds got louder and louder until a green streak with silver then glint flew across the screen. Professor's disembodied head then flew at the camera. His eyes were staring directly at me at the remainder of the video before cutting to black. Thinking it was over, I went to turn off the TV, but I stopped when I heard the sounds of screaming and singing. Blossom and Bubble's screams were quiet, as Buttercup's voice was loudly saying, "Hush, little babies, don't say a word. Mama's gonna kill you and make you burn. If you just won't burn, Mommy's gonna bury you in the beneath the ferns." Throughout, the words were cheesy. The sound of Buttercup singing and the eyes of her, and like the professor, still haunts my dreams. And that, my little pretties, was Buttercup.AVI, a Powerpuff Girls Lost Episode creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story. Now, I remember I think I narrated this back in 2019 or something, but the first time I heard about this narration was from Shadow's channel, and that was, on his old channel before it was terminated. And I would have to say this story was definitely, oh my goodness. This story was definitely not good at all. I'm only saying this just to be, friendly as possible, but I definitely would have to say there's so much things wrong with this pasta. Now, I could get it that this one was an old story, taken by the fact the oldest one I've seen was like 9 years ago. So, this story, in my opinion, was not that good. I did not really like this story. I didn't care for this one. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and, kind of, go through a few things. But I'm gonna sit here and say right now, the grammar was okay. Like, the grammar was not terrible in any way, shape, or form. It does need to be a bit of work because I believe there were, some, grammatical errors in the story that I honestly, was pretty, like, okay, what did I just sat there and read? Like, to be honest, I know it's been quite a long time since I last touched this story. I think the last time I touched it was sometime in 2019, and then I stopped, looking at this story because of how terrible it is. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. I think this might have been maybe some attempt of the author trying to come up with something different. So, I think the story was maybe written maybe in 2014 or something. I don't really know exactly. I think that might be it, but I'm not really sure. But this story just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And that's the main problem, is that the story itself was just not that great. Like, the story just didn't exactly do like make a whole lot of sense. Because with this story, on the other hand, I was just, the story just didn't really, wasn't that great. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the story was not terrible. It's not a terrible story. Like, it's not terrible in any way, shape, or form. It is an interesting, well, not interesting concept or anything, because the concept was just cliched. Anyone seeing, a messed up episode, Buttercup sitting there and, killing, Blossom and Bubbles, although you don't see it. And then she kills Professor Utonium at the end. And, I was like, oh god, are you serious right now? Like, just because of the story alone this story just didn't really sit out with me in a very honest way. I'm being honest. Like, the story was cliched, and it was just a cliched story. Like, I get it that this is like an older pasta, but this story was just, it was just cliched, and to be honest, but why would Buttercup sit there and kill everyone? Like, there's no reason of her to sit there and kill, Blossom and Bubbles and Buttercup. Like, there's no reason of her to sit there and do that. Like, there's literally no reason to do that. And that's just to me, though. I'm not trying to sound hypocrite. That's just me sitting there and saying it. But to be honest, this story was from the Creepypasta Wiki, the regular one, which it did get deleted from the Creepypasta Wiki, which it didn't surprise me. I kind of knew that was going to happen. I kind of knew it was going to get, deleted from the Creepypasta Wiki, which, in my honest opinion, it didn't really surprise me in any way, shape, or form. But this story of its own self, I'm going to be completely honest, is that this story was just not that good. Like, at all. I didn't really, like how this story went out. It was, pretty cliched in of its own self. It's a pretty cliched story. Seeing, like, hyperrealistic blood, hyperrealistic gore, oh, excuse me, pardon me about that, but, oh my goodness, like, this story just wasn't that great, seeing, all this, the whole concept of itself, everything that is going on, like, this story it just didn't, it just wasn't good. That's the main issue, is that it just wasn't that good for what this is. Now, this story was not, a good one. I'm being honest. This story was just not that good. So, God, I have not watched this movie, and, well, not watched the movie. No, it's not a movie, but I have not sat there and, I guess, narrated this story in, like, really hell of a long time. Like, I think the last time I touched this story was back in 2019 or something. And when I first heard of it, I just was like, oh god, are you serious right now? Now, the few things I could definitely say that does need was a positive was the grammar was okay, although I did spot some grammatical errors that needs to be fixed up. There were a couple run-on sentences in the story, so that actually made me, stutter because there were places where periods, there was like places in the story that should have been periods, should have been commas, or they weren't there, or they were just not there at all, and it made the story a bit hard to read. That's the main issue with the sentence structuring is that. Like, it's, like, the sentence structuring is alright, although it does need to be fixed up because of the lack of proper punctuation marks. So, there's definitely that. But, like, the paragraph structure was good, although there was some, there was this, like, one of the paragraphs that was extremely big. It does need to maybe be separated. I think one in the beginning, then somewhere, explain about the episode of what's going on and, what happened to, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. So there's definitely that. But it does need to, the story, if I would have to say something about the story, it just needs to be fixed up. That's the only thing I could give, is that it needs to be fixed up. The story was just not that good. Now, to the author, please try and revise the story, and I hope you went out of your way and made better stories. So, I guess with that being the case, that being said, I'm going to sit there and wrap up the review. There's not even really much I could say at this point, so yeah, there's definitely that. So, I guess with that being the case, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the review. Now, like I'm going to sit here and say right now, like I always continue to say, this is simply my own personal opinion. If you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regarding these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be not a 10 out of 10. My final rating of the story would have to be, I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. I know 3 might be a bit high, but I'm giving this a 3 out of 10 because the grammar was okay for what it is. Same with the sentence structuring and the paragraph structuring. But the story was just cliched. It was not that great at all. So that's actually one of the reasons why it gets like a 3 out of 10. Other than that, the story was just not that great. There's like, I could go on, forever explaining, why the protagonist, using so many tropes and cliches that have been done and been used, in other pastas. I don't get it why, a lot of creepypastas like to do this, but unfortunately they do. And I want to mention that I'm not sure who the original author is of this story because I can't seem to find it. I am going to leave it as anonymous for now, unless I do find out who the original author is. If I find out who the original author is, I'll be sure, I'll be sure to give the author proper credit. If I were to find the original author, I'll be sure to give him or her proper credit on this story, in description and in the title as well. If he or she has a YouTube account and somehow is able to find this, I really hope he or she can tell me, so then I can put that down to credit the author. But other than that, the story was just not good. Not good at all. Now, anyways, that being the case, that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me now what your thoughts are down in the comments section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And, oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. I had a meal from McDonald's, so it's kind of why I'm burping so much, so I do apologize. And if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so then you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro, because I'm out of here, and I think I'm going to go and get my brain fixed, because my brain hurts from reading this story.